My mother was standing under the string lights in my grandmother's barn, holding a glass of champagne and telling everyone how proud she was of both her daughters. I was seated 6 feet away with my phone in my hand. On the screen was an audio file that lasted 3 minutes and 48 seconds. My mother didn't know I had it. My father didn't know I'd spent months collecting contracts, letters, and loan papers. My sister was smiling beside her fiancé, still believing our mother had arranged her wedding honestly. Nobody in that room knew what was about to happen. My name is Jenna Carlson, and I'm 32 years old. If you've ever been the dependable person your family only values when something needs fixing, I think you'll understand this. Please like the video and subscribe. The rehearsal dinner took place on a Friday night at Rhonda's Orchard, outside Nashville, Indiana. The orchard had belonged to my grandmother, Rhonda Carlson. After she died, it passed into a family trust, and I became the sole trustee. That sounds important when I say it now. For most of my family, it only meant I handled the boring parts. I paid the property taxes. I reviewed the insurance. I called Stephen Murray, the groundskeeper, when a fence post cracked or a pump started making noise. If a storm took shingles off the barn, I found a roofer. If the county mailed something with a deadline, I dealt with it. My parents liked that arrangement until the word trustee meant I could tell them no. My mother, Teresa, finished her toast that Friday by looking at Hannah and me. "My girls," she said, "different in every way, but both so special." This weekend came together because everyone did their part. My father, Douglas, raised his glass. I watched him over the rim of mine. He knew that sentence wasn't true. He also knew exactly what my mother had done. He just didn't know how much I could prove. I placed my glass on the table and stood. That was the moment I'd been rehearsing for 2 days. But to understand why I stood up, you have to understand why everybody expected me to stay seated. Hannah is 3 years younger than I am. She lives in Indianapolis, and even when we were adults, my parents still talked about her as if she were the family's promising young star. Hannah changed jobs, and Mom called it brave. I stayed at the same company and got promoted, and Mom said, "Well, you've always liked stability." Hannah leased an apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, and my parents drove up to help her move. They took pictures on the balcony and posted them everywhere. When I bought my townhouse, my father asked if I'd checked the water pressure. Then he walked through the basement looking for foundation cracks. It wasn't that they ignored me completely. They relied on me. That was different. I'm a commercial property manager. My work days are mostly tenant calls, maintenance bids, insurance certificates, and people insisting a problem is urgent because they forgot to answer 3 emails. I'm good at it. I know how to keep records. I know which questions to ask before signing anything. I also know that when someone keeps saying, "Don't worry, it's handled," the thing is usually not handled. My family used those skills whenever they needed them. When my parents' refrigerator stopped cooling the week before Thanksgiving, I found the repair company. When Hannah needed someone to review the lease for her first apartment in Indianapolis, she sent it to me at nearly midnight. "Just tell me if anything looks weird," she said. The document was more than 40 pages. I read it before work the next morning. But if I asked for anything in return, even something small, it became a discussion about my expectations. My grandmother never did that. Rhonda lived at the orchard on Sycamore Hollow Road. The property wasn't enormous, but it was big enough to be work. There were rows of apple and pear trees, an old farmhouse, a storage shed, and a timber barn that had once held farm equipment. My grandfather had repaired that barn himself for years. After he was gone, Grandma converted part of it into an event space. She rented it for small dinners, anniversary parties, and local craft weekends. Behind the barn was her rose garden. She had planted it slowly. There wasn't one grand landscaping project. She added bushes whenever she had extra money or found a color she liked. Some had neat little metal labels. Others were marked with faded wooden stakes in her handwriting. During the last 4 years of her life, I drove out there several evenings a week. My parents lived closer than I did. Hannah lived farther away, but distance wasn't really the issue. She came when there was a holiday meal or when Grandma mentioned taking family pictures. She didn't come for the leaking sink or the medical appointments. One Tuesday evening in 2019, Grandma called while I was leaving work. "The ceiling in the back bedroom looks damp," she said. "How damp?" There was a pause. Noticeably. That meant bad. I changed into jeans at my office, bought a flashlight, and drove to the orchard. It had been raining for most of the week. Water had spread across one corner of the bedroom ceiling, and the wallpaper was starting to lift. Grandma stood in the doorway with her arms folded. "I put a towel down," she said. I looked at the dry towel on the floor. For the water coming through the ceiling, it seemed responsible. I laughed, and she gave me the smallest smile. The next morning, I called roofers before I went to work. I met one of them at the orchard during lunch. He showed me pictures of damaged flashing and soft wood around a vent. Grandma didn't like his first estimate, so I got another. Then another. My mother called while I was sitting at Grandma's kitchen table comparing them. "Is it really that serious?" she asked. "There's water inside the house. I mean, can it wait until spring? It's October." Mom sighed. "Your grandmother gets nervous when people start talking about repairs." Grandma was sitting across from me, eating toast and listening. "She's not nervous," I said. "She wants to know what she's paying for." "Well, don't let anybody take advantage of her." "I won't." "Good. Keep me posted." That was my mother's version of helping. She wanted updates so she could feel included, but she didn't want a task. Grandma signed the roofing agreement that afternoon. The contractor needed someone available to coordinate access and routine work on the property. In 2019, Grandma had me sign a short authorization letter allowing me to deal with groundskeeping and maintenance contractors on her behalf. It was narrow. It covered ordinary repairs. I kept a copy in my personal files because that's what I do with signed property documents. At the time, nobody cared about that letter. Years later, my mother would use it for something it had never authorized. I didn't know that yet. All I knew then was that Grandma trusted me with the work. As her health got worse, the work changed. There were still broken gates and invoices, but there were also doctor visits. I learned which entrance at the medical center had the shortest walk. I kept crackers in my car because one of her medications made her sick if she took it without food. I knew she hated the paper gowns and always wanted her own sweater back as soon as the exam was over. At one appointment, the doctor explained that a treatment wasn't helping as much as they had hoped. Grandma sat very still. I asked the questions because she didn't. What happens if she stops it? What would the next option involve? How often would she need to come in? On the drive home, she watched the trees through the passenger window. "You don't have to fill the silence," she said. "I know. You're trying to think of something useful. I am. Sometimes there isn't anything." We stopped at a diner in Nashville because she wanted vegetable soup. She ate half of it, wrapped 2 crackers in a napkin, and put them in her purse. When we got back to the orchard, my mother's car was in the driveway. Mom had brought a bakery box and a bunch of grocery store flowers. She hugged Grandma and said, "Why didn't anybody tell me today was the appointment?" "I sent you the schedule last week," I said. Mom looked at me. "Well, you know how buried messages get." She turned back to Grandma. "How did it go?" Grandma took off her coat. "Not well." Mom's face changed immediately. She pulled out a chair and sat down. For the next hour, she was attentive. She made tea. She touched Grandma's hand. She asked me to repeat what the doctor had said. Then she left before dinner because my father didn't like eating late. I stayed to refill the pill organizer and take out the trash. That was how things worked in our family. My mother arrived for the part that looked like love. I stayed for the part that left stains on the counter. In 2021, Grandma asked me to meet her at Denise Rios's law office. Denise handled her estate planning. She was direct, careful, and patient with Grandma without ever speaking to her like she was confused. I sat beside Grandma at a conference table while Denise explained the new trust. The orchard would be held by the Rhonda Carlson Family Trust. Grandma named me as sole trustee. I remember looking at her. "Are you sure?" Grandma adjusted the sleeve of her cardigan. "I didn't come here by accident." "I know, but Mom's going to have an opinion. Teresa has an opinion about whether she isn't standing in." Denise looked down at her papers, but I saw the corner of her mouth move. I asked what being trustee meant. Denise explained it plainly. I would be responsible for the property, its expenses, and any commercial use. I would have the authority to approve contracts involving the orchard. I would also have to act for the trust, not for myself. So I can't just sell it and go to Italy, I said. Grandma looked at me. Do you want to sell it and go to Italy? No. Then we've solved that problem. She didn't give a speech about why she chose me. That wasn't how she talked. On the drive home, she asked if I would stop for coffee. We went through the drive-thru and she held the cup between both hands. You show up, she said, that was all. My parents were told the estate plan was handled. They never asked to see the trust. I think they assumed the details could be sorted out later, inside the family, where my mother usually got her way. When Grandma died in 2023, she was 83. The last week of her life was quiet. I spent most evenings at the farmhouse. My mother came every day and my father came when he could. Hannah drove down from Indianapolis twice. I don't blame Hannah for not knowing what to do in that room. Most people don't. She sat beside Grandma and showed her pictures on her phone. She talked about work and a restaurant she wanted them to visit when Grandma felt better. Grandma listened, even though we all knew there wouldn't be another restaurant. After Hannah left, I found Grandma looking toward the dark window. She means well, Grandma said. I know. You don't have to answer so quickly. I folded the blanket at the foot of her bed. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything. That was one of the last clear conversations we had. After the funeral, my parents went home with the flower arrangements that still looked fresh. Hannah went back to Indianapolis because she had a presentation Monday morning. I stayed at the orchard with Stephen and made sure the caterer collected the serving trays. The trust became active, and I took over the property officially. For 2 years, nobody challenged it. The orchard paid its own basic expenses through small events, seasonal leases, and a local grower who maintained part of the fruit rows. I kept separate accounts. Denise reviewed the annual paperwork. Stephen handled the grounds, and I approved repairs. My parents treated the orchard like family property whenever they wanted to visit, and like my responsibility whenever something cost money. Honestly, I let that continue. I didn't want to turn Grandma's place into a border checkpoint. My mother had grown up visiting that property. My father had repaired things there. Hannah and I had spent holidays in the farmhouse. I thought keeping access easy was a kindness that didn't cost me much. Then Hannah got engaged. Matthew Alvarado proposed in Indianapolis in the spring of 2025. Hannah called me before she posted anything online, which surprised me. She held up her hand during the video call. Look. The ring caught the light so hard I had to move my phone. Wow, I said. That's beautiful, isn't it? Matthew leaned into the frame from beside her. She said yes. I assumed that from the ring. He laughed. I liked Matthew. He was calm and he didn't perform every conversation. He worked in logistics, which meant he understood schedules and hated vague plans almost as much as I did. Hannah started talking about venues before they had chosen a date. Everything around Indianapolis is either a hotel ballroom or somebody's fake rustic barn, she said. I knew where the conversation was going before she said it. What about Grandma's orchard? I didn't answer immediately. Hannah's smile tightened. Just as an idea. It could work, I said. We'd need to check capacity and insurance. Oh my God, Jenna. I'm not asking for a fire inspection right now. You're asking about a commercial property. I'm asking my sister if I can get married at Grandma's place. Matthew glanced toward her. She's probably just saying there are details. Thank you, I said. Hannah rolled her eyes, but she was smiling again. Fine. Details. We'll have details. The next Sunday, my parents invited everyone to dinner. Hannah and Matthew came down from Indianapolis. We ate roast chicken, green beans, and potatoes at the same dining table where most family decisions had been made without anyone admitting a decision was happening. My mother had already bought a wedding planning binder. It sat beside her plate with fabric samples sticking out. We can put the ceremony near the pair rows, she said, then cocktails by the barn. Hannah opened a page on her phone. I was thinking the ceremony behind the barn, by the garden. I set down my fork. The rose garden stays untouched. Hannah looked at me. I didn't say we'd rip it out. You'd need a level surface for chairs. Nothing gets covered, dug up, or moved. Mom smoothed her napkin. Nobody wants to hurt the roses. And every vendor contract comes through me, I said. I'm the trustee. Insurance, tents, catering, temporary power, all of it. There was a short silence. My father kept eating. Hannah leaned back in her chair. You're being weird about flowers. They were Grandma's. She was my grandmother, too. I know. Then stop talking like I'm trying to bulldoze her memory. Matthew put his hand beside Hannah's plate. I don't think that's what Jenna said. Mom looked at me with the tired expression she used whenever Hannah became upset and I hadn't prevented it. We can all communicate, she said. There's no need to make this tense. I'm not making it tense. I'm stating the conditions before we agree. My father finally spoke. Do you agree or not? I looked around the table. Hannah was waiting. Mom had her pen resting on the open wedding binder. Dad's expression said he thought I was delaying something already settled. I thought about Grandma's barn full of flowers. I thought about Hannah standing in the rose garden in a white dress. I thought it might be one of the few family choices that could feel good afterward. Yes, I said. The orchard can host the wedding. The garden stays untouched, and every contract goes through me. Great, Hannah said. Done. She reached for the potatoes. Mom wrote something in her binder. At the time, I believed they had heard me. The next morning, I sent everyone an email. It wasn't angry. I kept it short. I confirmed that Hannah and Matthew could use the orchard for the wedding. I listed the date we had discussed, the areas available, and the parts of the property that were off limits. I wrote that no vendor could sign for access, perform work, or bind insurance without a contract approved by me as trustee. I copied my parents, Hannah, Matthew, and Stephen. Matthew replied first. Received. Thank you, Jenna. Stephen wrote. Understood. My mother called me instead. Did you really need to put all that in an email? I was walking through a parking garage at work. I had my laptop bag over one shoulder and a cup of coffee in my hand. Yes, we're family. We're also hosting an event on trust property. You make it sound so cold. I'm making it clear. She lowered her voice. Hannah thinks you don't trust her. Hannah doesn't need to sign anything. The vendors do. That's not the point. I stopped beside my car. What is the point? The point is that your sister just got engaged and every conversation turns into a list of rules. We had one conversation. You know what I mean? I did know. She meant Hannah had complained after dinner, and now Mom wanted me to repair Hannah's mood without changing any of Hannah's behavior. I'm not changing the conditions, I said. Nobody asked you to. Then we're fine. Mom was quiet for a second. You can be very difficult to talk to when you get formal. I'm standing in a parking garage. That isn't what I meant, I know. She ended the call by saying she had to get ready for work. I sat in my car and added a note to the property file with the date and time. That was my first deliberate decision. I was going to document everything, not because I thought my mother would forge a contract. That possibility hadn't entered my mind. I expected pressure, not fraud. I thought Hannah might hire a florist without checking placement, or Mom might promise a caterer access to the farmhouse kitchen. Normal family boundary pushing. I had managed properties long enough to know that normal boundary pushing could still become expensive. At work, I created a folder called Hannah Wedding. I saved the email, the proposed date, the trust's insurance information, and a copy of the site plan. Then I went back to my actual job. For a while, nothing happened. Hannah sent me pictures of dresses. Mom texted links to folding chairs and table linens. Matthew asked whether the barn's electrical panel could handle warming cabinets and a sound system at the same time. I answered what I could. The wedding date settled in January. It was later than Hannah first wanted, but the orchard already had 2 fall events booked. She complained about waiting until winter, then decided the bare trees would look elegant in photographs. Mom embraced that idea immediately. It'll be sophisticated, she said. Candles everywhere. Battery candles, I said. She looked at me across my kitchen counter. You don't allow real candles? Not inside the barn. What about during dinner? Still inside the barn? She held up both hands. Battery candles. Fine. Mom had come to my townhouse with the wedding binder and 3 containers of food I hadn't requested. She spread everything across my counter, including a printed floor plan of the barn. I hadn't given her that floor plan. Where did you get this? She looked down. Online, I think. The barn plans aren't online. Then maybe Hannah sent it. Hannah doesn't have it. Mom's hand paused over a page of centerpiece pictures. Well, maybe you sent it to me. I didn't. She gave me an impatient look. Jenna, I don't know. It was in an old folder from Grandma's events. Does it matter? I looked at the sheet again. It was an older layout, made before a storage room was added near the west wall. Grandma had probably printed copies for rental inquiries. It's outdated, I said. Use the site plan I emailed. We're only using it to think about tables. The measurements changed. Then send me the right one. I already did. Mom pushed the old plan toward me. See, this is what I mean. I came over to include you, and now I feel like I'm being audited. I rolled up the floor plan. You asked me whether the barn could fit 12 round tables. I'm telling you, this drawing won't answer that. It's the way you say things. I opened the refrigerator and put away the containers she had brought. Behind me, pages turned. Your kitchen looks nice, she said. Thanks. Did you change the light? Last month. I like it. That was how our arguments usually ended. There was no resolution. She simply moved to another subject and expected me to follow. I made coffee. We reviewed the current floor plan. She showed me pictures of white draping and a dark green table runner. For almost an hour, we spoke normally. Before she left, I asked her to send me the names of any vendors she or Hannah had contacted. It's all preliminary, she said. That's fine. I don't want you calling people and confusing them. I'm not going to confuse anyone. We don't have contracts yet. Then names are enough. She zipped the binder closed. I'll have Hannah make a list. That list never came. A week later, Hannah asked me to meet her and Matthew at the orchard. They were driving down to look at ceremony locations, and Mom had arranged for a photographer to join us. I arrived first. It was hot enough that the barn doors had swollen in their frames. Stephen was trimming around the fence near the farmhouse. I found him at the equipment shed and asked whether anyone had been out to inspect the property. Your mother came by Tuesday, he said. With who? He rested the trimmer against the wall. Just herself, far as I saw. She walked around the barn, took pictures. Did she ask you for anything? She wanted to know where the outdoor outlets run. What did you tell her? That they run where they've always run. I smiled. Stephen had worked at the orchard long enough to be unimpressed by every member of my family. If she brings vendors out, I said, please call me. He looked at me for a moment. You expecting trouble? No, I'm expecting wedding planning. That can be trouble. He picked up the trimmer again. I'll call. Hannah and Matthew arrived 20 minutes later. The photographer was a woman named Lydia Pierce. She looked around the property, checked the direction of the sun, and asked sensible questions about access. Mom came separately with a tote bag full of bottled water. We started near the pear rows. Hannah stood where she imagined the ceremony arch would go. Matthew paced out an aisle. Lydia took test pictures. For a little while, it was easy. Hannah looked happy. Not performative happy, not social media happy. She stood under a tree with her hair pulled up and kept reaching for Matthew's hand when she talked. I wanted that part to stay uncomplicated. Then we walked behind the barn. The roses were in full summer bloom, red, cream, coral, and a pale pink variety Grandma had planted along the stone border. The garden wasn't perfectly symmetrical. Grandma had never cared about symmetry. There was a narrow gravel path through the middle and a wooden bench near the back. Hannah stopped beside the path. This is it, she said. Lydia lifted her camera. For the ceremony? No, for the first dance. I turned toward her. What? Hannah stepped onto the gravel. We could put a clear floor over this section. You'd still see the flowers around it. No. She looked at me as if I had interrupted her. It wouldn't touch them. You'd need supports. You'd need people carrying flooring through the beds. The ground isn't level. Mom opened a bottle of water. We're brainstorming. I already said the garden stays untouched. It would stay untouched, Hannah said. That's the point of a clear floor. Matthew looked at the narrow path. Would it even fit? We'd make it fit. No, I said again. Hannah stared at me. You didn't even think about it. I've thought about what happens when temporary floors go over landscaping. You manage shopping centers and office buildings and outdoor common areas. This isn't one of your properties. It literally is a property I manage. Mom stepped between us, though neither of us had moved. Let's not ruin the day. I'm not ruining anything, Hannah said. I had an idea, and I answered. She turned to Lydia. Can you take a picture from this angle anyway? Lydia glanced at me. A picture is fine, I said. Hannah walked into the center of the path. Matthew joined her. They stood between the roses while Lydia photographed them. Mom came beside me. You could try saying no more gently. Would that change the answer? No, but it might change how people feel. I watched Hannah lean into Matthew. Why is managing her feelings always my job? Mom twisted the cap onto her bottle. That's not what I said. It's what you ask me to do. You're older, by 3 years, and you're more practical. There it was. Hannah got to want things. I got to understand why she wanted them. We finished the tour without another argument. Before everyone left, I showed Matthew the electrical panel and the caterer access door. Mom took more pictures. Hannah stayed near the garden. As I locked the barn, she walked up beside me. You know I loved Grandma too. I never said you didn't. You act like you're the only one allowed to care about this place. I'm responsible for it. Because Grandma picked you. Yes. The word came out before I could soften it. Hannah looked toward the parking area, where Matthew was putting water bottles into their car. She didn't even ask me to be trustee, to do anything. She knew you lived in Indianapolis. That's an excuse. It's a fact. Hannah folded her arms. You were always here. You made sure you were always here. I held the barn key in my palm. What does that mean? It means you liked being the one Grandma needed. I looked at her. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Hannah shook her head. Forget it. No. Explain what you mean. I don't want to fight. You just accused me of turning Grandma's last years into some kind of competition. I didn't say that. You said I made sure I was always here. Hannah's face tightened. You know what, Jenna? This is why Mom doesn't tell you things until she has to. Everything becomes a hearing. She walked away before I could answer. I stood beside the barn door and watched her get into the car. Mom was already gone. That evening, I called Kimberly Bird. Kimberly worked with me, and we'd been friends for years. She knew enough about my family to ask useful questions instead of automatically telling me to keep the peace. I sat on the back step of my townhouse while the light faded over the neighboring roofs. Hannah said Grandma never asked her to do anything, I said. Did Hannah offer? Not that I know of. Then what exactly was your grandmother supposed to ask? I don't know. Did she need a person to drive in from Indianapolis and photograph the roses? I rubbed my thumb over a rough spot on the concrete step. She thinks I liked being needed. Did you? Sometimes. That's honest. I didn't like the doctor visits. I didn't like arguing with insurance companies. I didn't like cleaning spoiled food out of Grandma's refrigerator because she'd forgotten when she bought it. No reasonable person would. But I liked that she trusted me. Kimberly was quiet. That doesn't mean you arranged for her to get sick. I know. Do you? I looked across my little patio. The basil plant on the table needed water. I'm trying. Kimberly asked what had started the argument. I told her about the clear dance floor. That sounds expensive, she said. It would be. Who's paying for this wedding? My parents said they're contributing. Hannah and Matthew are paying for some of it. How much are your parents contributing? I didn't ask. Maybe you should. It's not my business. It becomes your business if they expect the orchard to make the budget work. That stayed with me. The next day, I emailed Hannah again. I said I was sorry the conversation had become personal, but the garden boundary remained. I asked for the current vendor list and offered to schedule a planning call. Matthew replied that evening. He attached a spreadsheet with the photographer, caterer, florist, and a disc jockey. Several entries were blank. Under rentals, it only said, "Mom researching." I saved the spreadsheet. I replied with the insurance requirements for every vendor. I asked Matthew to have anyone needing property access contact me directly. Hannah didn't reply, neither did Mom. Summer moved on. Work got busy. One of my buildings had an air conditioning failure during a heat wave, and another had a tenant leave water running overnight in a utility sink. For several weeks, the wedding became a string of text messages I answered between other problems. Mom asked about table capacity. Hannah asked whether the farmhouse bedrooms could be used for getting ready. Matthew asked where deliveries should enter. I answered each question. I copied the answers into my folder. In August, I spent most of 1 week in Louisville helping with a property turnover. I left early Monday and returned Friday evening. Mom knew I was out of town because she called me Tuesday night and asked whether I could look at a catering proposal. "I'm in a hotel," I said. So send it to me. It's not final. Then send it when it is." She made a small sound. I was hoping for a quick opinion. "I can give you one if I can see it. I'll have Hannah send it." Nobody sent it. I didn't know that, while I was in Louisville, my mother took a tent company to the orchard. I didn't know she walked them behind the barn. I didn't know Stephen objected when they started measuring near the rose garden. And I didn't know she had already found a way to put a signature on paper. The first sign came in September. I called the trust's insurance agent from my office. I wanted to add event coverage for the wedding weekend and confirm what certificates each vendor needed. The agent, a man named Paul Henley, pulled up the orchard's file. I heard him typing. "What was the event date?" he asked. I gave it to him. He paused. "Is this for the Carlson wedding?" "Yes, I already have an event policy attached to that date." I straightened in my chair. Attached by who? Let me open it. I waited while he clicked through the file. Outside my office, someone rolled a cart down the hallway. One wheel squeaked every few feet. Paul came back on the line. "It looks like the request came through the rental company." "What rental company?" "Duran Tent and Event Rentals." I opened the wedding spreadsheet Matthew had sent me. The rentals line still said, "Mom researching." When was it bound? Several weeks ago. Who authorized use of the property? I don't have that page in front of me. I'm the trustee. Nobody asked me. There was another pause. His voice became more careful. "I can send you what I have. Please send the complete submission, not just the certificate. I'll need to request the underlying paperwork from Duran. Do that. Is there a problem with the event?" "I don't know yet." After we hung up, I checked my email, the family text thread, and every document in the wedding folder. There was no contract from Duran Tent and Event Rentals. There was no insurance request. There wasn't even a message telling me the company had been selected. I picked up my phone to call my mother, then I put it back down. If I called her first, I would get a story before I got the paperwork. Maybe the explanation was simple. Maybe Matthew had signed something and misunderstood the process. Maybe the rental company had attached the policy to the wrong property account. I wanted to believe one of those things. Instead of calling my family, I opened a new page in my notes and typed the date, the time, Paul's name, and exactly what he had told me. Then I emailed Duran Tent and Event Rentals. I identified myself as the sole trustee of the property and requested every document connected to the wedding. After I sent it, I called Stephen. He answered over the sound of an engine. "Everything all right?" I asked. He turned the engine off. "Depends what you're calling about." That was when I stopped telling myself it was probably a filing mistake. "What happened?" I asked. Stephen didn't answer right away. I heard a metal door close in the background. "Your mother brought some people out here last month," he said. "What people?" "Folks from a tent company. 3 of them, counting the owner." "Duran? That sounds right." I stood and closed my office door. "When were they there?" "Middle of August. You were in Kentucky. Why didn't you call me?" "Your mother said you sent them." I closed my eyes. What exactly did she say? "She said you'd approved the company and she was handling the walkthrough because you were busy. They had paperwork." I didn't think she'd invented the whole thing. Did she show you the paperwork? No. Didn't ask to see it. Stephen sounded irritated now, mostly with himself. What did they do? They measured the barn, checked the service drive, looked behind the building. At the garden? That's where I had a problem. I sat back down. What kind of problem? They wanted to mark out a floor. The air conditioner came on above my desk. A vent rattled. What floor? Dance floor, I assume. They had stakes and orange cord. Inside the rose garden? Over the gravel path and part of the east bed. I gripped my pen hard enough to leave a line across my finger. What did Mom say? She said the bushes along that side would be moved temporarily. I stopped writing. Moved where? She didn't say. I told them nothing was getting dug up while I was there. Thank you. Your mother didn't appreciate it. I can imagine. She said it was only a few plants. I looked through the glass wall of my office. Kimberly was at her desk across the hall reading something on her monitor. Did the company stake anything? For about 10 minutes. Then I pulled the stakes. Did you take pictures? No. Did anyone else see it? One of the crew took measurements. I don't know what he photographed. I wrote down every detail. Did Mom bring anybody else to the property? Not with her that day. Has Duran been back? Not while I was here. From now on, nobody walks the property without you calling me first, even if Mom says I approved it. You got it. And don't discuss this call with her. Stephen exhaled. You think I'm looking to get between you and your mother? I think she'll call you if she knows we spoke. She probably will. Then tell her to call me. I thanked him again and ended the call. For a few minutes, I stayed at my desk with my hands flat beside the keyboard. My mother had taken a vendor to the orchard while I was out of town. She had used my name to get them past Stephen. She had allowed them to stake out Grandma's garden after I said, twice, that it was off limits. That was more than Hannah getting carried away with a wedding idea. It was planned. I opened the email I had sent after the family dinner. The conditions were plain. Mom had received it. She'd called to complain about it, so there was no possibility she had missed it. I forwarded the email to my personal account and saved another copy. Then I walked across the hall to Kimberly's desk. Do you have a minute? She looked at my face and locked her computer. We went into a small conference room. I told her about the insurance policy and Stephen's call. Kimberly listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked, Are the roses damaged? Not yet, then that's one good thing, for now. What does the insurance agent have? He's requesting the full submission. And the tent company? I emailed them. Don't call your mother. I wasn't going to. You were thinking about it. Of course I was. Kimberly leaned back in her chair. What would you ask her? Why she lied to Stephen? Why she told a vendor they could move the roses? Why there's a policy on my property that I didn't authorize? What answer would make any of that acceptable? I looked down at the table. None. Then wait for the documents. That was easy advice in a conference room. It was harder when my mother called that evening. I was in the grocery store, standing in front of a freezer case. Are you still at work? She asked. No, you sound distracted. I'm buying food. Oh, I only need a quick answer. The rental company needs access for setup on Thursday before the wedding. Is that all right? I looked at my reflection in the freezer door. What rental company? She hesitated just long enough. I'd have to look at the name. Duran Tent and Event Rentals? Yes, probably. You've spoken to them? Only generally. Have they been to the orchard? I don't remember. Maybe Hannah took them. Hannah lives in Indianapolis. She comes down. Did you take them? A woman pushing a cart stopped beside me, opened the freezer, and removed a bag of peas. I moved out of her way. Mom lowered her voice. Why are you interrogating me in the grocery store? I asked whether you took a vendor onto trust property. I may have met them there once. We've looked at so many things. Did you tell Stephen I approved it? I don't remember what I said to Stephen. He does. There was silence. Then Mom laughed lightly. This is getting ridiculous. Was a dance floor marked in the rose garden? It was a measurement. Nobody moved anything. That's not what I asked. They were trying to see what was possible. I already said it wasn't possible. You hadn't seen the proposal. I didn't need a proposal because you decided before Hannah even asked. She asked at the walkthrough. I answered there. Mom's voice sharpened. Your sister wants one dance in her grandmother's garden. She wants a floor installed over it. For 24 hours. No, you're acting like we're cutting down the orchard. I'm acting like I'm responsible for the property. That word again. What word? Responsible. You use it like nobody else in the family has ever done anything. I closed the freezer door. I'm going to ask you once more. Did you authorize Duran to bind event insurance? No. The answer came quickly. Then who did? I don't know how their office works. Did you sign anything? I've signed planning forms. What kind of planning forms? I'm not standing here with the binder open, Jenna. Where are you? Home. Then open it. She took a breath. You called me difficult for putting things in writing. Now you can't tell me what you signed. I did not call you difficult. You said I make everything tense. That isn't the same thing. Send me every document from Duran tonight. I'll send what I have, all of it. Mom's tone softened. Please don't upset Hannah over this. She thinks everything is finally coming together. Hannah doesn't know? Know what? That you took Duran to the orchard. I'm sure I mentioned it. That wasn't my question. Mom was quiet again. I have to help your father with dinner. She ended the call. I stood in front of the freezer for another few seconds. Then I put my phone in my purse and bought the food I'd come for. She sent nothing that night. The next morning, she texted at 7:13. I checked. Rental paperwork is still preliminary. Let's discuss as a family before anybody overreacts. I took a screenshot. At 8:40, I received a reply from Duran Tent and Event Rentals. A coordinator thanked me for reaching out and said their file showed the property representative had already approved access. I replied, please identify the property representative and provide the signed document. The coordinator wrote back that the owner, Alexander Duran, would contact me. He called shortly after lunch. His voice was calm and professional, Ms. Carlson. I understand there's some confusion about the orchard event. There's confusion on your side. I haven't authorized it. Our agreement was executed in August. By whom? I'm looking at the account now. Teresa Carlson. In what capacity? There was a pause. She's listed as trustee. She isn't the trustee. Alexander didn't answer immediately. Are you saying she doesn't represent the property? She's my mother. She does not have authority to sign commercial contracts for the trust. We were provided documentation showing the family's authority to coordinate contractors. What documentation? A signed letter concerning the property. Signed by who? Let me verify before I answer that. I heard papers moving. The letter is signed by Jenna Carlson. I moved my phone away from my ear and looked at it. What date? May of 2019. I knew exactly which document he meant. That letter covers routine maintenance contractors. It has nothing to do with commercial events. It was presented as evidence that Mrs. Carlson could coordinate on behalf of the property. The letter doesn't say that. I'll need to review it with our office. Send me the agreement and the letter. I can have our coordinator prepare a copy. Today. He became more cautious. There may be client information attached. It involves property held by a trust for which I'm the sole trustee. I understand. No, I don't think you do. Your company bound an insurance policy to my property using a 6-year-old maintenance letter. We relied on the information provided by the client. Then send me what the client provided. He agreed to review the file. Before we hung up, I asked whether the deposit had been paid. Yes. How much? $8,400. Who paid it? I'd need permission to discuss payment details. Did it come from the trust? No. I can confirm it did not. That gave me some relief, but not much. Is the deposit refundable? Not at this stage. Even if the person who signed had no authority, that's something we would have to address after reviewing the documents. I wrote down his exact wording. After the call, I took my copy of the 2019 authorization letter from my home files and scanned it. It was one page. Grandma's address appeared at the top. The body authorized me to schedule and supervise routine groundskeeping, maintenance, and repair contractors. My signature was at the bottom. Teresa Carlson's name didn't appear anywhere. Nothing in it gave my mother authority to act for me. Nothing called her a trustee. Nothing covered weddings, tents, event insurance, or temporary structures. Still, I didn't have the August agreement yet. I had Alexander's description of it, but I wanted the actual page. For the next 3 weeks, Duran's office moved slowly. First, the coordinator said Alexander was reviewing the file. Then she said their insurer had asked to see the trust documents. I refused to send the full trust and provided only the certificate naming me as trustee. Mom called twice during that period. Both times, she spoke as if our grocery store conversation hadn't happened. The first call was about chairs. The second was about guest parking. I answered only what involved the property. "Did you get my message about the rehearsal tables?" she asked during the second call. "Yes, and 8 tables will fit if the caterer uses the side room for staging." "Good. See, we can work together. Send me the Duran paperwork." Her voice changed. "I thought they were sending it." "So you do know it exists." "I never said it didn't exist. You said it was preliminary. It was when I last saw it." "Mom, did you sign their agreement as trustee?" "No. It was the second clean denial." I wrote down the time. "What did you sign?" "I already told you. Planning forms. Did you write the word trustee anywhere?" "You're twisting this. That's a yes or no question. I'm not having this conversation while you're in this mood. My mood doesn't change your signature." She hung up. 2 days later, Hannah called. "What are you doing with the rental company?" "I was at home, sorting mail at the kitchen counter." "What did Mom tell you?" "That you won't give them the trust documents. They don't need the trust documents, they need authorization from me. She said you're holding up the tent. There's already an agreement. Then why are you holding it up? Because I didn't sign it." Hannah was quiet. "I don't understand." "Neither do I. That's why I'm getting the paperwork. Mom said she was allowed to handle vendors. She's allowed to help plan. She isn't allowed to sign for the property. Is this actually a legal issue, or are you mad about the garden? It's a property issue." That didn't answer me. "Yes, it's actually an authority issue." Hannah sighed. "Can't you just sign whatever they need now? I'm not signing a contract I haven't read. The wedding is in a few months. Then Mom should send me what she signed. You know she's been doing all this work for us, right? I know she met a company at the orchard without telling me. She probably knew you'd say no." Hannah said it as if that explained something. I placed the mail on the counter. "Did you know they staked a dance floor in the rose garden?" "What?" "Stephen saw it." "No. Mom said they were measuring behind the barn. They placed stakes across the east bed. That doesn't mean they were going to damage anything. It means they were planning around a boundary I already set." Hannah's voice became tired. "I don't want to be in the middle of this. It's your wedding. I mean, between you and Mom. Then ask her what she signed." "I don't care what she signed. I care whether there's a tent." That answer told me where I stood. "I'll talk to you after I have the documents," I said. "Jenna, I'm not canceling anything. I'm asking for paperwork. It feels like you're punishing me." "For what?" "For wanting the wedding Grandma would have wanted me to have." I looked toward my dark kitchen window. Grandma wouldn't have wanted her roses dug up. That is not what I said. No, it's what I said. I ended the call before we could repeat ourselves. The agreement arrived in October. Alexander sent it directly, with a brief email saying he wanted to resolve the issue promptly. The attachment contained the use agreement, the site notes, the insurance request, and the old maintenance letter. I printed all of it. The agreement listed the $8,400 deposit. It authorized Duran to install a tent, lighting supports, temporary flooring, and related equipment at the orchard. The site notes included the words, "Garden access approved by property representative." At the bottom of the signature page was my mother's handwriting, Teresa Carlson. Under her name on the line marked title, she had written one word, trustee. I checked the date. August, while I was in Louisville. Then I laid the page beside the text message where she had told me the paperwork was preliminary, and the notes from both calls where she had denied signing as trustee. I didn't call her. I placed the agreement, the site notes, and the 2019 letter in a folder. Then I drove to the orchard to hear Stephen's account in person. Stephen was near the barn when I arrived. He had a leaf blower strapped to his back and hearing protection around his neck. I held up the folder. "Can we talk?" He looked at it and nodded. We went into the farmhouse kitchen. The room smelled closed up, with a faint trace of the lemon cleaner Grandma used on the counters. Stephen removed his cap and set it beside the sink. I placed the August agreement on the table. "Is this the company that came out?" He studied the logo. "Yes." I showed him the site notes. "Do these measurements match what they did?" Stephen pulled the page closer, 20 feet from the barn wall, 12 across the path. "Yes, that's about right." The notes included a rough drawing. A rectangle crossed the gravel path and extended over the eastern rosebed. Small circles marked the bushes along the edge. Beside 3 circles, someone had written, "Temporary relocation." I pointed to it. "Did you hear Mom approve that?" "I heard her say the plants could be moved and put back." "What did the owner say?" He asked, "Who would handle the landscaping?" "Your mother said the groundskeeper would." Stephen looked at me. "I told them the groundskeeper would not." I sat down. "Then what happened?" "The owner said they were only discussing options. One of his workers put in 4 stakes. I pulled them out." "In front of Mom?" "Yes. What did she do?" "She told me not to make a scene." That sounded exactly like her. "Did she say she was trustee?" "I don't remember that word." "Did she say I approved the plan?" "She said you'd given her authority to coordinate everything." "Everything?" That was the word. I turned the agreement around and showed him her signature line. Stephen read it twice. "You're the trustee?" "Yes." "So what is this?" "That's what I'm finding out." He rubbed one hand across his jaw. "I should have called you." "She told you I sent them." "I still should have called." "You stopped them from touching the roses." That mattered. He looked toward the back window. From the kitchen, we could see part of the barn and the first rows of trees. "Your grandmother would have run them off herself," he said. "She probably would have kept the stakes. She kept everything." I glanced toward the narrow pantry. Grandma had stored rubber bands in one drawer, sorted by size. She washed aluminum foil and folded it for reuse. She would have considered 4 free steaks a successful afternoon. I asked Stephen to write down what he remembered. He wasn't comfortable with anything formal, so I gave him a blank sheet from my folder and told him to use his own words. He sat at the table for nearly 20 minutes. He wrote the date as closely as he could remember it, the names he knew, and what my mother had said. He included his objection and the fact that he removed the stakes before the crew left. When he finished, he signed the bottom. "I'm not looking to get anybody in trouble," he said. "I know. I just don't want them saying I agreed to dig up those plants. They won't be able to say that." I made a copy using the printer in Grandma's old office. Stephen kept the original because he wanted to add the exact date after checking his work calendar. Before I left, I walked behind the barn. The roses looked normal. The gravel path had a few weeds between the stones. If Stephen hadn't stopped the crew, I might have arrived after the installation and been told the damage was temporary. I took pictures from every angle. Then I drove home and opened the files again. Here's the part that changed the problem for me. Until that afternoon, some part of me still believed Mom had been reckless. I thought she had signed the agreement because a vendor pushed a form across a table and she wanted to keep the wedding moving. That wouldn't excuse it, but it would explain the sequence. The site notes showed something else. She had walked the garden with them. She had approved removing living plants. She had told Stephen I gave her authority. Then she signed as trustee and gave Duran an old letter with my signature on it. That took preparation. The next morning, I called Denise. Her assistant found an opening 2 days later. Denise asked me to bring the complete Duran file, the trust certificate, and my original copy of the 2019 letter. Her office was on the 2nd floor of a brick building near the courthouse. The waiting room had 2 green chairs, a low table, and a water dispenser that made a loud, bubbling noise every few minutes. Denise came out herself. She looked older than she had during Grandma's appointments, though it had only been a few years. Her hair was shorter and she wore dark-framed glasses. "Come in," she said. I followed her to the same conference room where Grandma had signed the trust. For a moment, seeing that table bothered me more than I expected. Denise noticed. "We can use my office if you'd prefer." "No, this is fine." I sat in the chair I had used beside Grandma. Denise took the seat across from me. I handed her the documents in order. She read the August agreement first. When she reached the signature page, she looked up. "Did your mother ever serve as trustee?" "No." "Was she named as a successor?" "No, she wasn't." It wasn't a question. Denise had drafted the document. She opened her copy of the trust anyway and checked the relevant page. My name appeared as sole trustee. Denise placed a small tab beside it. Then she read the old authorization letter. "This predates the trust," she said, "by about 2 years, and you signed it in your individual capacity to assist Rhonda." "Yes." "It authorized routine property work." "Yes." Denise placed the 2019 letter on the left side of the table. She placed the August agreement on the right. She lined up the bottom edges. On one page was my signature beneath language about maintenance and repairs. On the other was my mother's signature beneath a commercial event agreement, followed by a title she did not hold. Denise tapped the first page. This did not give Teresa authority. I know. It didn't give her authority then, and it certainly didn't appoint her after the trust was created. Could Duran reasonably misunderstand it? By itself? They could misunderstand who coordinated maintenance. They could not reasonably read this as naming your mother trustee. She gave it to them with the contract. That's concerning. I slid the site notes toward her. Denise read the garden section. Her expression didn't change, but she went back and read it again. "Who owns the plants?" she asked. "The trust owns the property and everything planted on it." Was removal authorized in any separate landscaping agreement? No. Did you approve temporary flooring? No. Did your mother know that? I said it at dinner. Then I emailed it to everyone. Then I said it again during the walkthrough. "Bring me that email." I had printed it. I passed it across the table. Denise read my conditions, then checked the recipients. "Teresa received this?" She called me the next morning to complain that I put it in writing. That made Denise stop. What exactly did she say? I told her. Denise wrote a note on a yellow pad. "Did she ever tell you she signed the Duran agreement?" "No, she denied it twice." "Do you have those denials in writing?" One text says the paperwork was preliminary. The denials were during calls, but I made notes immediately afterward. "Keep those notes." "I will." She sat back. "This isn't a misunderstanding between sisters about wedding decorations." Hearing her say it out loud settled something. "What is it?" "Your mother represented herself as an officer of a trust. She signed a contract involving trust property. She supplied an unrelated document bearing your signature to support that representation. Is that forgery?" Denise chose her words carefully. "The signature itself appears to be Teresa's. The false part is the title and the authority she claimed. Whether someone labels the entire transaction a forgery would depend on the facts and the context. I would call it a material misrepresentation at minimum. Plain English, she claimed a power she knew she didn't have. I looked at the two documents. Can the wedding still happen? That depends on what else has been signed and what you decide after we get complete information. I don't want to cancel Hannah's wedding. I didn't ask what you wanted to cancel. I asked what else has been signed. I don't know. Then find out before you approve anything." Denise reached for the agreement again. "Do not sign a replacement merely to make this problem disappear. Signing a new document without understanding the full vendor structure could be treated as accepting what has already been arranged. So I need every contract. Yes, rentals, temporary structures, catering access, electrical work, insurance, and anything involving alterations to the grounds. My mother won't give them to me. Then request them from the vendors. She'll say I'm humiliating her. That is not a property management issue." I almost laughed. "No, it's apparently my main family issue." Denise removed her glasses. "Jenna, Rhonda didn't make you trustee, so everyone else could act first and ask you to clean up later." The room went quiet. That was the big discovery. My mother hadn't merely ignored my boundary. She had built the wedding around authority she knew belonged to me, then used my own old signature to make her lie look official. If you know what it's like to find your answer in the paperwork, leave the word Rose in the comments. I asked Denise to put her comparison in writing. She agreed. The letter would stay factual. It would identify the limited scope of the 2019 authorization, confirm that it predated the trust, and state that Teresa had never been appointed trustee. Before I left, Denise made copies of everything. At the door, she said, "You should decide how much you want your family to know before you contact them." Why? Because once they know what you have, they can tailor their explanation to it. I thought about calling Mom from the parking lot. I didn't. Instead, I emailed every listed vendor. I identified myself, provided the short trust certificate, and requested all contracts connected to orchard access. Most responded normally. The florist had no property agreement. The caterer had a proposal but no signed access terms. The disc jockey had only a service contract with Hannah and Matthew. Duran was the only company holding a contract signed by my mother as trustee. That should have narrowed the problem. In a way, it did. But it also meant the false signature wasn't an accidental habit. She had used it exactly where it mattered. Denise sent her letter the following week. It was 2 pages. The language was calm, but there was no room inside it for Mom's version. The 2019 letter did not appoint a trustee. The 2021 trust named only me. Teresa had no legal authority to approve commercial use, temporary structures, or alterations at the orchard. I printed 3 copies. Then I waited to see what my parents would do when they realized I wasn't going to sign behind them. They didn't address it directly. My father called first. "Your mother says there's an issue with the tent company. She signed their contract as trustee. She was trying to keep things moving. She isn't trustee." "I know that." His answer came too quickly. I sat at my dining table with Denise's letter in front of me. "How long have you known?" "Known what?" "That she signed it." Dad cleared his throat. "I knew she was helping with vendors. That wasn't my question. Jenna, the wedding is 3 months away, so this is not the time to create a family crisis. I didn't sign Mom's name. She signed her own name. She added a title she doesn't hold. You're getting hung up on wording. It's a signed contract, and you can correct it." There it was. Not surprise, not confusion. A solution he had already discussed with her. "You want me to sign a replacement? I want everybody to sit down and work this out. Did you know she gave them my maintenance letter?" He paused. "I knew there was an old property letter. Where did she get it?" "It was in your grandmother's files. Those files were in the farmhouse office. Your mother had every right to look through her mother's papers, not to remove trust documents. It wasn't a trust document. You just said it was old." The distinction was too quick. He knew exactly what the letter was and what it wasn't. I wrote down his words while he kept talking. He said Mom had carried most of the planning. He said Hannah was under pressure. He said a deposit could be lost. Then he said something I had heard from him in different forms my whole life. "You're the one who understands this stuff, Jenna. Help us fix it." I looked at Denise's letter. What does fixing it mean to you? Sign the proper paperwork and let the wedding proceed. And the garden? They've already adjusted the plan. According to who? Your mother. Then no. Dad exhaled into the phone. "This is why we need a meeting." The meeting happened in November at my parents' house. Hannah and Matthew weren't there. Mom said there was no reason to worry them over a technical issue. That told me Hannah still didn't know. Mom had placed coffee and cookies on the dining table. My father sat at one end. Mom sat beside him, with the wedding binder closed in front of her. I brought my folder. Mom noticed it immediately. "Do we really need documents for a family conversation?" "Yes." She looked at Dad. He said, "Let's stay calm." Nobody had raised a voice. I placed the August agreement on the table. "Did you sign this?" Mom barely looked at it. "We've been over this." "No, you denied it. I'm asking while the document is in front of you. I signed what Duran gave me. As trustee, they needed a contact title. You wrote trustee because I was acting for the family, That isn't what trustee means." She pressed her lips together. "I'm not a lawyer. You knew I was trustee." "Of course I knew. Then why did you use my title?" Mom looked down at the binder. "It was the only way to hold the date without bothering you in the middle of your work trip. You called me during that trip about catering. That was different. You could have asked me. You would have said no." The room became still. Dad shifted in his chair. I asked, "No to what?" Mom opened the binder and removed a revised layout. The dance floor had been moved away from the eastern bed, but it still covered the gravel path and reached into the center of the garden. "This," she said. "You would have rejected it before seeing how careful they could be. I'm rejecting it now." Her eyes lifted to mine. "Of course you are." Dad pushed the layout aside. "The floor can go somewhere else. That isn't the main issue. The main issue is Mom signed as trustee. The main issue," he said, "is whether you're going to let one bad decision derail your sister's wedding." I handed him Denise's letter. He read the first page. Mom didn't ask to see it. That told me she had already heard what it said. Dad set it down. "This is exactly what I mean. You went to an attorney before you came to us. I came to you several times." Mom lied. "I did not lie," she said. "You told me the paperwork was preliminary. It was signed and paid. I meant the plans were preliminary. You denied signing as trustee. I didn't remember the wording. You remembered enough to give Duran my old letter." Mom's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. "I'm not going to sit here and be treated like a criminal for planning my daughter's wedding." She picked up the coffee pot and carried it to the kitchen, though nobody had asked for more. Dad watched her go. "You've made your point," he said quietly. "No, I've asked a question." "What question? Why did both of you think I'd fix this after the fact?" He looked toward the kitchen. Then he said, "Because you always do." I put the documents back in my folder. That meeting changed my position. I stopped treating the agreement as a mistake they might admit. They knew it was false. They simply believed my usefulness mattered more than my consent. When I stood to leave, Mom called from the kitchen. "Are you really going to punish Hannah over flowers?" I put on my coat. "No. I'm going to protect the property Grandma trusted me to protect." Dad followed me to the front door. "We'll talk when you've had time to cool down. I'm not angry." That seemed to bother him more than if I had been. I drove home with Denise's letter on the passenger seat and one question I still couldn't answer. Why were my parents willing to risk a paid deposit, a wedding, and the orchard itself just to avoid asking me? The answer was in a cardboard file box. A week after the meeting, Denise asked me to finish organizing the remaining records from Grandma's final tax return. Most of the work had been completed after she died, but several property valuations and expense receipts were still mixed with ordinary household papers. The box was in the farmhouse office. I went out on a Saturday morning with coffee, labels, and a package of new file folders. Stephen was working near the storage shed. The farmhouse was cold, so I turned up the heat and sat at Grandma's desk wearing my coat. For the first hour, I found nothing unusual. There were orchard receipts, prescription statements, utility bills, and handwritten notes Grandma had clipped to invoices. She had written, "Too much," across one plumbing estimate, then hired the plumber anyway. Near the bottom of the box, I found a large envelope from a bank. I assumed it was connected to the estate. The front had my parents' names and home address, but that wasn't immediately strange. Mom had used the farmhouse office to sort papers after the funeral. She had mixed several of her own documents into Grandma's files. I opened the envelope to see where it belonged. The first page was a loan summary. The amount was $45,000. The borrowers were Teresa and Douglas Carlson. The loan had been taken against their house in 2024. I read the page again. My parents had always talked as if their house was nearly paid off. Dad mentioned it whenever somebody complained about rent. "That's why you buy," he would say. "Eventually, the house belongs to you." Apparently, part of theirs belonged to the bank again. I checked the date. The loan had been opened the year before Hannah's engagement. It wasn't a wedding loan. It was financial pressure that already existed when Mom offered to help pay for one. The packet included the monthly payment, closing costs, and a page showing the house as collateral. A sticky note in my mother's handwriting was attached to the payment schedule. It said, "Doug, needs to stay private." I sat back in Grandma's desk chair. The house was quiet except for the heat coming through the floor vent. I didn't know what they had used the money for. The paperwork didn't say. I didn't have access to their bank accounts, and I wasn't going to pretend I did. But I knew 3 facts. They had borrowed $45,000 against their home. They didn't want anyone to know. And less than a year later, Mom had committed $8,400 to one wedding vendor while pretending to have authority over somebody else's property. I took pictures of the loan summary, the payment schedule, and the sticky note. Then I placed the pages back in the envelope exactly as I had found them. I kept sorting. That sounds strange, but I needed the routine. Property appraisal, left pile, medical statement, shred pile, orchard receipt, tax folder. My hands kept moving while the last 6 months rearranged themselves in my head. Mom's irritation whenever I asked who was paying, her refusal to send the vendor list, the outdated barn plan, the secret walkthrough, Dad telling me I could correct the contract. They weren't avoiding paperwork because paperwork felt cold. They were avoiding a number. When I finished, I locked the office and carried the tax files to my car. I left the loan envelope in the box because it belonged to my parents. Before driving away, I emailed the photographs to myself and stored copies with my other records. I didn't confront them. I still needed to understand how the loan connected to the wedding. The next Monday, I emailed Dad a plain question. Who is responsible for the remaining Duran balance and the related event costs? He called within 10 minutes. Why are you asking that now? Because nobody has given me a wedding budget. You don't need the whole budget. I need every cost attached to the orchard. The tent is a wedding cost. Paid by who? Your mother and I paid the deposit. That wasn't the question. He sighed. Hannah and Matthew are contributing. Your mother and I are contributing. Some property-related expenses could reasonably come from the orchard account. There it was. What property-related expenses? Temporary electrical work, grounds preparation, insurance, things that improve the venue. A temporary dance floor doesn't improve the venue. I didn't say dance floor. What did you mean by grounds preparation? Whatever needs to be done. The trust is not paying wedding expenses. It's hosting the wedding, at no charge, and we appreciate that. Do you? He became quiet. I continued, the orchard account pays for the orchard. It doesn't reimburse you for promises you made to Hannah. Nobody asked for reimbursement. You just said the account could cover expenses. I said legitimate property expenses. For a wedding. For an event that will generate photographs and publicity for the barn. We're not advertising the wedding. You're missing the larger point. No, I think I finally found it. Dad's voice lowered. You need to be careful how you talk to me. I looked at the notes in front of me. Send me the wedding budget. That is between us and Hannah. Then don't expect the trust to pay any part of it. He ended the call. A few minutes later, Mom sent me a text. Your father is very upset. We have never treated the orchard like a bank account. I didn't reply. She sent another. Grandma would have wanted the property to help Hannah. That sentence was the cleanest version of their reasoning. Grandma was gone, so Mom could assign her whatever opinion was useful. The orchard belonged to a trust, but Mom still saw it as family money. I held the keys, so I was expected to unlock it when Hannah needed something. I forwarded both messages to my personal email. That evening, I went through every wedding document again. The Duran agreement required payment of the remaining balance before setup. It also made the property representative responsible for site access and restoration costs. If equipment damaged the barn, the garden, or the service drive, the person claiming to represent the property had accepted those terms. Mom had signed as trustee. If everything went well, she got the wedding she promised. If something went wrong, she expected me to handle it. The next week, she mailed me a copy of the revised garden layout. There was no note inside. The dance floor had moved again, this time just outside the main rose bed. A dotted line still crossed the gravel path for electrical cables. I returned it with a written response. No temporary flooring, supports, cable covers, staging, or vendor traffic may enter the Rose Garden. No trust funds are authorized for wedding costs. 3 days later, the same drawing came back. Mom had circled the words, "No trust funds," and written, "Nobody said this." I placed that page in the folder too. December came, and the orchard went quiet. The trees were bare. Stephen shut down the irrigation lines. The barn held the smell of cold wood and dust. Wedding decorations started arriving at my parents' house, but nobody sent me a complete budget. Kimberly and I stayed late at work one Thursday because a tenant was moving into a renovated suite the next morning. We sat in the conference room with takeout containers while we waited for a contractor to confirm the final inspection. I had avoided telling her about the loan. It felt different from the vendor contract. The contract involved the trust. The loan was my parents' private financial problem, but it had become impossible to separate them. I showed her the photographs. Kimberly read the loan summary, then the sticky note. "They took this out before the engagement," she said. "Yes." "Do you know where the money went?" "No." "Do you know whether they still have it?" "No." She handed my phone back. "Then don't claim either one." "I'm not." "What has your father said about wedding costs?" I showed her my notes from the call and Mom's messages. Kimberly read them in silence. "So they promised Hannah a wedding they couldn't comfortably afford," she said. "Probably. And instead of admitting that, your mother used a free venue." "I agreed to the venue." "Right. Free venue with conditions. Then she signed as trustee so vendors would treat those conditions as hers to change. I pushed my food away. She thought I'd sign afterward. Your father told you to. She thought once the deposit was non-refundable, I wouldn't risk ruining the wedding." Kimberly nodded. "And if the orchard needed electrical work or landscaping, they'd call that a venue expense, paid by the trust, which means handled by you." The inspection email appeared on my laptop. I read it, confirmed the contractor had passed, and closed the screen. Kimberly watched me. "What aren't you saying?" I looked at the loan photograph again. This wasn't just Mom getting excited about Hannah's wedding. No, they were cornered before the wedding planning started. Yes, they needed the orchard to be free. They needed the trust to absorb anything that didn't fit their budget. And they needed me to cooperate without telling Hannah they couldn't afford what they promised. Kimberly folded her napkin. "That sounds like the complete version." I thought about Mom bringing food to my townhouse and complaining that I was auditing her. She wasn't offended by the questions. She was afraid I would get far enough to see the answer. "They didn't ask because I might say no," I said. "Also because asking would require numbers, and if Hannah saw the numbers, she'd know." "Know what? That our parents aren't in the position they pretend to be." Kimberly leaned forward. "Jenna, this is important. Hannah may be entitled, but according to everything you've shown me, she doesn't know about the signature or the loan. I know. She thinks your mother arranged a legitimate venue. I know that too. Then your parents put both of you in different versions of the same lie. That was harder to accept. Hannah had dismissed me. She had supported Mom. She had said she didn't care what was signed as long as there was a tent. But she didn't know our mother had claimed to be trustee. She didn't know our parents had a $45,000 loan against their house. She believed they could afford the wedding they offered her. She believed the orchard arrangements were legitimate because Mom told her they were. My parents had counted on Hannah not asking practical questions. They had counted on me asking them privately. Then they had counted on me protecting Hannah from the answers. Kimberly gathered the empty takeout containers. "So what are you going to do?" "I'm not telling Hannah yet." "Why?" "Because if I go to her without a clear answer about the contract, Mom will say I'm using private financial papers to attack her wedding. She will say that, and Hannah will believe her." Kimberly tied the plastic bag closed. "What do you need?" "I need to know exactly what authority I have before the event. Not what I assume, not what Dad thinks I'll do. I need it in writing." "From Denise?" "Yes, and until then, I don't approve anything." That night, I emailed Denise. I attached the Duran agreement, her earlier comparison letter, the site restrictions, and my parents' messages about using orchard funds. I asked one question. If I refuse to adopt Teresa's agreement, what can I lawfully do before the wedding? Her assistant scheduled me for the first week of January. I printed the confirmation and placed it in the front of my folder. For the first time, I understood why my parents had moved so quickly. The wedding wasn't built around the orchard because Grandma would have loved it. It was built around the belief that I would pay, approve, repair, and stay quiet before anyone noticed they couldn't. In early January, I carried the folder back into Denise's conference room. She had already reviewed my email. A legal pad sat in front of her with 3 questions written across the top. First, she said, "Have you signed any wedding contract since our last meeting?" "No." "Have you told any vendor in writing or verbally that you accept Teresa's agreement?" "No." "Has the trust paid any wedding expense?" "No." She checked off each answer. Good. I removed Dad's statements about property expenses and Mom's marked-up garden plan. Denise read them without comment. "What can I do?" I asked. "You control access to the property." "I know that generally. You control it specifically. The trust document gives the trustee exclusive authority over commercial use. Teresa cannot grant access in her own name, and she cannot grant it using that maintenance letter. So the Duran agreement is invalid? It is not binding on the trust unless you adopt it." "What about the insurance policy?" "That depends on how it was issued. We need the policy language and written confirmation from the company." I gave her the submission Paul had sent. She read the certificate, then turned to the attached application. The application identified Teresa as trustee. Under property authorization, a box marked "Confirmed" had been checked. Denise pointed to it. "Who confirmed this?" Duran submitted it. Then we asked Duran what they relied on, and we asked the carrier what happens if the named property representative had no authority. "Can we do that without notifying Mom?" "We don't need her permission to verify insurance on your property." Denise called Alexander while I was sitting there. He answered after his receptionist transferred us. Denise put the call on speaker and identified herself. "I represent Jenna Carlson in her capacity as trustee," she said. "I need to clarify the status of the wedding use agreement." Alexander's voice became guarded. "I've provided everything from our file. You have, and I appreciate that. Has Jenna ratified the agreement signed by Teresa Carlson?" "No." "Has your company received any separate property use authorization signed by Jenna in her capacity as trustee?" "No." "Then what is the current basis for access?" "We were hoping the family would resolve that before setup." "That is not a basis." Alexander paused. "No. If Jenna formally declines to ratify the August agreement and revokes any apparent authority Teresa claimed, will your company enter the property? Not without a new authorization. And the event policy? I need our broker to answer that. Please bring the broker onto a call." He agreed to arrange it. Before Denise ended the call, I asked one question. "Did my mother tell you I would sign later?" Alexander hesitated. "She said the trust paperwork was a formality." "What were her exact words?" "I don't remember the exact wording. Did she say I had approved the event?" "Yes." "Did she say I knew about the agreement?" "My understanding was that you knew." "I didn't." "I understand that now." After the call, Denise wrote something on her pad. "He knows his company has a problem," I said. "Yes." "Does that help me?" "It means he is unlikely to risk entering the property without valid authorization." She turned to a blank page. "The cleanest step is a written revocation and non-ratification notice. You state that Teresa was never trustee, that you do not adopt her contract, and that no vendor has authority to enter under anything she signed. When does it take effect?" "Immediately upon delivery." "Can I choose when to deliver it?" "As long as you act before they enter and begin work. But I would not wait without a reason. I'm still trying to save the wedding. Saving the wedding and accepting this contract are separate choices." That distinction mattered. I could approve a lawful version. I could require a different floor plan, valid insurance, and direct payment by the people holding the wedding. I didn't have to reward the false agreement to avoid hurting Hannah. What would a lawful version require? I asked. A new agreement signed by you, a corrected insurance application, any required underwriting review, payment terms made clear, no representation that the trust is paying unless it actually agrees to pay. How long would that take? Ask the vendor. Alexander scheduled the insurance call 2 days later. Denise joined from her office. I joined from mine with the door closed. Alexander and his broker, a woman named Sheila Kent, called from Duran's office. Sheila explained the policy without turning it into a lecture. The event coverage had been issued based on the Duran agreement and Teresa's statement that she controlled property access. The carrier had accepted that statement because Duran submitted the old authorization letter as support. I asked, "Did anyone read the date or the scope?" "We reviewed the submission provided by the vendor," Sheila said. "That isn't an answer," Alexander spoke. "Our office should have asked for current trust authority," Sheila continued. "If the property owner, through the lawful trustee, withdraws authorization, the event cannot proceed under the existing application. Does the policy stay active? Not for an event that no longer has legal access to the location, so the coverage lapses. For that location and arrangement, yes. What if I sign a new agreement? A corrected submission would be required. How long would approval take? Normally, several business days. Longer if the event plan changes or if there are temporary structures near protected landscaping." I looked at my calendar. "And Duran's contract?" Alexander answered, "We would need to void the existing use arrangement and issue a new one. Would the $8,400 deposit transfer? We could apply it to a replacement agreement if the scope remained similar. Who paid it?" He paused. "Your parents paid by check. Are they responsible for the remaining balance? The contract lists the property representative." Teresa listed herself. "Yes, personally or as trustee?" "As trustee. So the agreement attempts to make the trust responsible." Alexander took a breath. "That is how the title appears." Denise stepped in. "Which is why my client cannot adopt it without review." Nobody argued. After the call, Sheila emailed a short confirmation. If valid property authorization was revoked, coverage based on that authorization would no longer support the wedding at the orchard. Any new arrangement would require a corrected application and approval. Alexander sent a separate email. Duran would not enter or install equipment without written authority from the lawful trustee. I printed both. That was the lever. It wasn't dramatic on paper. It was 2 emails and a provision in the trust. But together they meant my mother's entire plan depended on one thing she had never obtained: my consent. Denise drafted the revocation notice. It stated that I was the sole trustee. Teresa had no actual or apparent authority. I declined to ratify the August agreement. Any vendor authorization based on her signature could be withdrawn immediately. Denise left the effective date blank. "You can sign this when you decide," she said. "What if Mom signs something else before then? She still lacks authority. What if Dad does? He lacks it too. What if Hannah signs as the client? She can contract for wedding services. She cannot authorize commercial access to trust property." I placed the unsigned notice beside the trust certificate. For years, my family had treated being trustee as another chore. I was the person who paid bills, met contractors, and knew where Grandma kept the spare keys. They had forgotten that responsibility came with authority. I hadn't understood the full weight of that authority either. Not until Denise put the revocation in front of me. I took the document home and stored it in a locked drawer. The next day, Mom called. Her voice was cheerful. "Good news. Duran says they can still hold our setup schedule." "Did they say under which agreement?" "Jenna, please, I'm asking." "They said it can all be corrected with one signature, mine." "Well, yes. You are the trustee." She said it as if she had always respected that fact. "Send me the final budget," I said. "We've talked about this." "No, you've avoided it. It's Hannah's private information. Then Hannah can pay the vendors directly. She and Matthew are paying plenty. How much remains on Duran?" Mom didn't answer. "I have the contract," I said. "I know the payment schedule." "Then why are you asking? I want to hear you say who's paying. Your father and I will handle it. Without trust funds? Why are you obsessed with that? Because Dad said the orchard account could cover property expenses. He was speaking generally. I'm speaking specifically. Mom's cheerful tone disappeared. No trust funds and no garden access. Fine. Send both in writing. She gave a short laugh. You really don't trust your own mother. I looked at the locked drawer across the room. You signed my title on an $8,400 contract. I was trying to help your sister. You were trying to force my approval. That is such an ugly way to describe your own family. Send the terms in writing. She hung up. That evening, Dad emailed me. Teresa and I will cover approved vendor costs not paid by Hannah and Matthew. We do not expect direct payment from the trust. The word approved did a lot of work. I replied, no cost is approved by the trust. All property access remains subject to my written authorization. He didn't respond. 2 days later, Hannah texted the family group. Can we please have 1 week without fighting about paperwork? I want to enjoy getting married, Mom replied with a heart. Dad wrote, absolutely. I typed 3 different responses and deleted them all. Hannah still didn't know what the paperwork said. If I explained it in the family text, Mom would turn the discussion into an attack on the wedding. If I called Hannah alone, she would call Mom before I finished speaking. I decided to wait until I could talk to her with the documents in front of us. I also decided the wedding could proceed only through a new agreement. I emailed that condition to my parents. I offered 2 appointment times with Denise and Alexander so we could correct the contract before the event. Mom rejected both. The first conflicted with a hair appointment. The second, she said, was unnecessary because everybody understands the arrangement now. I offered a 3rd time. She didn't answer. The deadline for ordinary insurance review kept getting closer. I signed the revocation notice but did not date or deliver it. Then I made 4 copies of the trust certificate, Denise's comparison letter, the August agreement, and the insurance emails. 1 set went in my office. 1 stayed at home. 1 went to Denise. The last went into a plain black folder I kept in my car. I wasn't planning a public confrontation. I was making sure that when my mother finally forced the decision, she couldn't erase what gave me the right to make it. The call came on Wednesday afternoon. I was leaving a tenant meeting when my phone rang inside my bag. By the time I found it, the call had ended. Mom! She didn't leave ordinary voicemails. If I missed her, she usually sent, "Call me," with no explanation. A notification appeared while I was walking back to my office. New voicemail, 3 minutes and 48 seconds. I pressed play. At first, I heard fabric moving against the phone. Then Mom's voice came through from a distance. She'll sign it. She's just making us wait. Dad answered, but his words were muffled by road noise. Mom spoke again. She isn't going to stop the wedding the day before. That would make her look terrible. I stepped into an empty office and shut the door. The recording had started in the middle of a conversation. They were in the car. I could hear a turn signal and the soft rush of tires. Dad said, "She has the attorney involved." So, Jenna always needs a folder. He said something I couldn't make out. Mom laughed. No, listen. Hannah gets overwhelmed. Jenna handles things. That's how it's always worked. Dad's voice became clearer. She doesn't want the garden touched. We'll deal with the garden thing quietly once the wedding is over. How? Replace anything that needs replacing. With what money? We'll figure it out. We already have enough tied up in this. Dad said, we can't put more against the house. There was a short silence. Then Mom said, we won't have to if Jenna stops being stubborn. I sat down in the empty office. The phone stayed in my hand. Dad asked, what if she tells Hannah? She won't. She likes being the reasonable one too much. That doesn't mean she'll pay. She doesn't have to call it paying. The orchard account covers property things. She'll find a category. Dad didn't answer. Mom continued in the same bright voice she used when explaining a seating chart. Jenna has always been the backup daughter. That's what she's good at. Hannah gets to have her life, and Jenna covers whatever Hannah doesn't want to carry. I stopped breathing for a second. Not because I had never understood the arrangement, because I had never heard my mother name it. Dad said, that's not fair. It was the weakest objection he could have made. Mom answered, "It's not an insult. Jenna likes being needed. Look at everything she did for Mom." The recording went quiet except for the car. Then Dad said, "You shouldn't have signed trustee. I know that now. You knew it then. I knew Jenna would make it official later. She hasn't. She will tomorrow or Friday. She's not going to embarrass Hannah in front of Matthew's family. What if Duran won't set up? They're already coming. Once everyone is there, Jenna will do what she always does." "What's that?" "Fix it." The voicemail continued for another 20 seconds. Mom said something about place cards. Dad asked whether they needed gas. Then the recording ended. I played it again. The second time, I wrote down the exact words. The third time, I checked the file length and saved it. I emailed the audio to myself. I uploaded a copy to the secure property file. Then I sent it to Denise with one sentence. "My mother accidentally left this voicemail today." Denise called 10 minutes later. "Was Indiana the location of the call and the recording?" "Yes." "Keep the original file unchanged." "I will. Do not edit it." "I won't." "Have you delivered the revocation?" "No." "Are vendors on the property?" "Not today." "Then your authority's unchanged." I looked at the transcript I had typed. "Can I play this for my family? You may share a voicemail left for you. I'm advising you as your trust attorney, not giving you a strategy for family dinner." "I understand." "Do you?" "No, not really." Denise was silent for a moment. "Decide what outcome you need. Then use only what supports that outcome." After the call, I sat alone until Kimberly found me. She knocked once and opened the door. "You missed the budget call." I turned my phone toward her. "Listen." She sat beside me. I played the voicemail once. Kimberly didn't react until Mom said, "Back up, daughter." Then she looked at me. When the recording ended, she stayed quiet. I picked up my pen and aligned it with the edge of the notepad. She said it like a job description. "Yes." "She thinks it's a compliment." "No," Kimberly said. "She thinks calling it a compliment means you can't object." I looked at the phone. I could call her now. "You could." "I could send the file to the family group. You could do that too." "Neither feels right." "Then don't do either today." The next day, Thursday, Kimberly came to my townhouse after work. I had printed every document I might need. The trust certificate came first, then Denise's comparison letter, the 2 mismatched documents, Stephen's statement, the loan photographs, the vendor and insurance emails, and the signed revocation notice with the date still blank. The voicemail sat on my phone. Kimberly placed the pages in order. "What are you going to say to Hannah?" "I don't know. Try." I stood at the kitchen counter. Mom signed the Duran agreement without authority. "That sounds like a meeting." I tried again. "Before the wedding proceeds, everyone needs to understand that the vendor contract isn't valid." "Better." "I don't want to make a speech." "Then don't." I played the voicemail through a portable speaker. The first few seconds were too quiet. Kimberly adjusted the volume, and we tested it again. Hearing Mom's voice fill my kitchen made my stomach tighten. "I could still talk to her privately at the rehearsal," I said. "Yes. Give her one chance to admit it." "What happens if she cries?" I show her the documents. "What happens if she says Hannah will never forgive you?" I show her the documents. "What happens if she tells everyone you threatened to cancel the wedding over flowers?" I looked at the speaker. "That's why private doesn't work." Kimberly nodded. She didn't smile or tell me she was proud of me. She just helped me place the pages back in the folder. On Friday morning, I signed and dated a separate access form allowing Duran's crew to deliver tables, heaters, and lighting for the rehearsal dinner only. It did not approve Saturday's installation. It did not adopt Mom's August agreement. Alexander signed it too. When I reached the orchard that afternoon, his trucks were parked beside the service drive. Crew members carried equipment into the barn. Nobody went near the rose garden. Alexander met me by the west door. "We still need the Saturday authorization," he said. "I know. Your mother says it's being signed tonight. She's wrong." His eyes shifted toward the barn. "Then we have a problem." "Yes." "Do you intend to revoke the August agreement?" I'll tell you before your crew leaves tonight." He studied my face, then nodded. Inside, Mom directed tables as if nothing were unresolved. She wore a dark blue dress and low heels. Dad carried boxes of glassware. Hannah stood with Matthew near the front of the barn, practicing where they would enter after the ceremony. Mom saw my folder. "What's that?" "Property paperwork." Her mouth tightened. "Tonight?" "Yes." She glanced toward Hannah. "Please don't start anything." "I haven't." "We're almost there, Jenna." I let her walk away. The rehearsal went smoothly. The garden was used only for photographs. The ceremony practice took place near the pair rows. Matthew's family arrived, along with family friends, vendors, and members of the wedding party, all adults who had rearranged their weekend to be there. By dinner, nearly every chair in the barn was occupied. I sat beside Kimberly. The black folder rested under my chair. My parents moved from table to table, greeting people. Mom accepted compliments about the orchard as if she had donated it herself. After the main course, Dad tapped his glass. He thanked Matthew's family for welcoming Hannah. He thanked the vendors. Then he handed the microphone to Mom. She stood beneath the string lights. "This place means so much to our family," she said. "My mother would be thrilled to see us all here." People smiled toward Hannah. Mom continued, "A wedding takes work, and love, and patience. Sometimes it takes a little flexibility, too." Her eyes touched mine, then moved on. "But that's what family does. We come together. We don't keep score." Dad raised his glass. Mom looked at Hannah and me. "My girls," she said. "Different in every way, but both so special. This weekend came together because everyone did their part." She lifted her glass higher, to Hannah and Matthew, and to family always. Everyone applauded. Mom smiled and sat down. I waited until the applause stopped. I stood and placed the portable speaker on the table. Mom looked at it. "What are you doing?" "Letting everyone hear what you said on Wednesday." Her face changed. "I didn't talk to you Wednesday." "No." "You left me a voicemail." I pressed play. The barn filled with the sound of fabric moving against Mom's phone. Then her voice came through. "She'll sign it. She's just making us wait." Mom pushed her chair back. "Turn that off." I didn't. Nobody else moved. The recording continued. Dad's voice came next, warning her that I had involved an attorney. Then Mom laughed and said, "Jenna always needs a folder." A few people looked toward the black folder beside my chair. Hannah stared at Mom. "What is this?" Mom reached for the speaker. Matthew placed his hand on the table between them. "Let it play," he said. Mom looked at him. "This is a private conversation." "It was left on Jenna's voicemail," he said. The next part played. Hannah gets overwhelmed. Jenna handles things. That's how it's always worked. I watched Hannah's expression settle into something still. Then the loan came up. Dad said they couldn't put more against the house. Hannah turned toward him. "What house loan?" He looked down at the table. Mom's voice kept going. "Jenna has always been the backup daughter. That's what she's good at. Hannah gets to have her life, and Jenna covers whatever Hannah doesn't want to carry." Nobody whispered. Nobody touched a glass. Mom sat down slowly. On the recording, Dad told her that wasn't fair. Then she said, "It's not an insult. Jenna likes being needed. Look at everything she did for Mom. I let the entire file play. I let everyone hear her say she would deal with the garden after the wedding. I let them hear Dad warn her about signing as trustee. I let them hear her say I would fix everything once people were watching." When the recording ended, I turned off the speaker. Mom's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "You had no right to play that. I had every right to play a voicemail you left me. You embarrassed your sister." Hannah looked at her. "Stop saying she did this to me." Mom turned. "Hannah, you don't understand." "No, I don't." "What house loan?" Dad rubbed both hands over his face. Mom said, "This is not the place." "You made it the place," Hannah said. "You just gave a toast about honesty and family." "I did not say honesty. That was the wrong answer." Even Dad looked at her. I opened the folder. "This is the August Duran agreement. Mom signed it as trustee. She has never been trustee. I placed the agreement on the table and slid it toward Dad. This is the maintenance authorization I signed in 2019. Mom gave it to Duran as if it supported her signature. It doesn't. This is Denise Rios' written comparison of both documents. Dad took the pages. I placed the trust certificate on top. I am the sole trustee. I did not authorize the August contract. Hannah reached for the agreement before Dad finished reading it. She found Mom's signature. You told me Jenna was holding up the tent, she said. She was. She didn't sign this. I was trying to reserve it for you. As trustee, it was a title on a form. Alexander stood near the barn door. No, Mrs. Carlson, he said. It was the authority our company relied on. Everyone turned toward him. I removed the signed revocation notice. As trustee, I declined to adopt the August agreement. I revoke any authority Teresa claimed on behalf of the orchard, effective now. I handed the notice to Alexander. He read it, checked my signature, and looked at Denise's letter. Mom stood again. You can't cancel this the night before. Alexander answered before I did. Without valid property authorization, the use agreement is void. The event policy attached to it can't cover tomorrow's setup. What does that mean? Hannah asked. It means we cannot install the tent, flooring, lighting supports, or equipment under this contract. The wedding cannot proceed here tomorrow as currently arranged. Hannah went pale. Matthew moved his chair closer to hers. Mom pointed at me. She planned this. Yes, I said. I verified my authority in January. I offered 3 appointments to replace the contract legally. You rejected them. Dad looked up from Denise's letter. 3, check your email. Mom said, because there was no reason to drag lawyers into a wedding, there was after you signed as trustee. Hannah was still holding the agreement. What loan? Nobody answered her. I took out the photographs of the loan paperwork and placed them beside Dad. $45,000 against their house. Opened in 2024. Mom wrote that it needed to stay private. Hannah looked from the page to our parents. You told us you were fine. We are fine, Mom said. Dad spoke quietly. No, we're not. Mom turned on him. Doug. We can make the payments, but we couldn't afford everything we promised. Hannah's eyes closed. Matthew asked, were you expecting the trust to cover the rest? Dad looked at me. We thought some venue costs could come from the orchard. The orchard was already free, I said. He nodded once. That was the collapse. No shouting, no dramatic confession. Just my father sitting under Grandma's string lights, admitting they had tried to make the trust carry costs they couldn't. Mom looked around the room. I hope everyone's happy. Nobody answered. The wedding did happen the next day, but not the wedding Mom had built. There was no tent. There was no temporary dance floor. Duran removed the equipment delivered for Saturday and left only what the separate Friday agreement covered. Matthew called the caterer. Hannah called the florist. I called Denise. The existing barn could host a small private family ceremony without the commercial installation, provided I gave written permission and we stayed within its ordinary occupancy and insurance limits. No temporary structures, no public event, no trust money. By midnight, the guest list for the orchard portion had been cut to immediate family and close friends. Other guests were invited to a restaurant reception in Bloomington that evening. Matthew found the restaurant through a coworker. It wasn't decorated, it wasn't rustic. It had gray carpet and framed pictures of vineyards on the walls. It was legal, available, and paid for directly. Mom and Dad covered the remaining vendor bills themselves. Hannah and Matthew paid the restaurant deposit. Duran later applied part of the original deposit to work already performed and returned what its cancellation terms allowed. The trust paid nothing. Hannah married Matthew near the Pear Rose on Saturday afternoon. She wore her original dress and carried the same flowers. Stephen set out chairs from the barn. Kimberly helped the florist tie arrangements to the aisle seats. The rose garden stayed standing. Mom barely spoke to me. Dad thanked me once for allowing the smaller ceremony, then looked embarrassed that he had said it. I stayed through the photographs and the meal. I wasn't warm, but I was present. There's a difference. Afterward, my parents sent several messages. Mom said I had chosen public humiliation over family loyalty. Dad said the voicemail should have remained private. Neither apologized for the signature, the loan, or the plan to use trust money. I stopped responding. I changed the farmhouse access code. My parents could visit the orchard by appointment, like everyone else. They did not receive another copy of the office key. Weeks later, Hannah called. "I owe you an apology," she said. I waited. "I treated every rule like you were trying to control me. I didn't ask why Mom was hiding things." "No, you didn't. I also said you like Grandma needing you." "Yes." That was cruel. I sat at my kitchen counter, looking at the light above the sink. "Why did you say it?" "Because she chose you and I was jealous." That answer was honest enough to hurt. Hannah continued. "I'm not asking you to forget it. I just wanted to say I'm sorry without Mom in the room. Thank you." We didn't become close overnight. We started with occasional calls. She stopped asking me to smooth things over with our parents. I stopped answering questions she hadn't asked. By fall, several of Grandma's older rose bushes needed replacing. Stephen and I spent an afternoon removing dead roots and working compost into the soil. Hannah sent money for 2 new bushes. She didn't ask for her name on a marker. I planted 1 pale pink rose beside the gravel path. When I pressed the soil around it, I thought about Grandma saying I showed up. Being dependable was never the problem. The problem was letting other people treat my dependability like permission. If you want more stories like this, subscribe and tell me which city you're watching from.